episode 39 of the Bithell Games Podcast. I'm Alexander Slawinski.
And I'm Mike Bithell.
Each week... Are you? I don't know.
I feel the listener enjoys a different feel. You know, this is, every week we talk about the games we're playing, the games
what it's like to make games.
What it's like to make games. And the
random stuff. The random stuff.
Not doing while we do make games.
Yeah.
It's good. Good job.
Show notes. Subsurface Circular, available now on iOS for your iPad, also on the Steams. If you're a voting member of any organizations, it'd be cool if we could get a nomination
for awards and such
from your year-end stuff, whether you are part of, I don't know, a large organization of trophy giving groups, or if you run a media outlet and it's getting towards the end of the year and
I'm seeing a lot of people suggesting it's People's Game of the Year, and I like those people. If you're one of those people, don't harass people, but you're not harassing, you're being very friendly and you're suggesting it very politely as a Game of the Year, and that makes me very happy. Thank you. It
actually has been pretty lovely, and things are going well. Surprising things to me. I love it when something like so Extra Credits did a piece.
It was Extra Credits and Giant Bomb on the same day, I think.
Oh, was it?
Yeah, that's what happened. That because we saw, to listeners don't have our Steam stats, we had a very good day that day, and actually it's not fallen off yet. It's trending off as it usually does, but it looks like that genuine bit of fuel has just upped our general sales quite significantly. So that's good. So far, so good.
No, very cool. And especially the Extra Credits piece has a bunch of other sort of titles that.
Have you never watched that show before? Are you not an Extra Credits fan? That's a show they've been doing for years. I think Thomas Was Alone was in that 5 years ago.
No. I definitely watch Extra Credits. It was just
that specific show's great. There's so much good stuff.
Yeah, that specific episode had us in there, but then a bunch of other titles that in the deluge
and somehow Sonic as well. It's oh wow, finally Sonic's getting some attention.
I think it's more. I think the Sonic thing is more Travolta after Pulp Fiction.
Yeah,
right?
it was definitely the second Sonic game this year, even though it was the first. It definitely had that kind of. It wasn't as pushed by Sega necessarily. It was more of the hardcore, but such a nice story as well. That came from the community and it came from the fans. Which, as a professional game designer, is, of course, very scary.
I was about to say, you must love the idea that, just give us the IP, we'll make a better game, and then you've got a situation like this where it's
that. Hey, it happens every now and again. It's good. And kudos to Sega for, I'm sure they get a lot of fans messaging them saying, I'd love to make a version of Sonic or whatever. And fair play to them for A, ignoring all the rest of them, and B, listening to the one group that could do it. And I think my understanding is they were doing some ports and stuff, so it wasn't out of nowhere. They'd had a relationship and built up an experience that let them do that, right? I think. But
Mike, the story's so much more uplifting and
it's
fun.
A plucky. It's just a dude in his bedroom with his team of porting house staff. It's either way, it's a great story. Because that's the thing I think often gets forgotten is every game designer you love is also a massive, massive gamer as well. There's no game designers who don't like games. There's lots of artists who don't like games. I've definitely worked with artists who don't play video games, but that doesn't matter because they're making art and the art looks amazing and it's fine. But I think you'd be hard-pressed to find a game designer who's not a massive fan of video games.
If you're an artist who doesn't like games and you listen to this show, we would love to hear your perspective on this.
There's
no.
I could name someone. There's
no, you're right.
Yeah, I've worked with them in the past. Not on our games, but yeah.
But I'm saying, if you're an artist and you don't like games and you happen to listen to this show, contact@bithellgames.com. That's contact@bithellgames.com. Love to hear your perspective.
I once asked, very early in my career, asked a concept artist if he had played a specific game that I was playing, and he said very rude expletive and told me to go away because I was a nerd, and I was in a games company. It was wow, okay.
There's nothing to unpack there.
There's no deep-rooted psychological stuff. No.
I'm just trying to think of how someone ends up in that. Well, I mean,
the job. I mean, as a concept artist, to dig into this, like a lot of concept artists bounce around the film and games industries because at their part of the process, it's a very similar process, right? Like, effectively, and I think it's fair enough. I don't need. I don't need everyone who works on games to be a video game fan. It's helpful in design for sure, but like some of the greatest video game programmers don't play games because for them the joy is in the creation of engines and the amazing kind of maths they do, and that's fine because you want the smart person. You don't care necessarily what their interests are or what they come from. You want the best people making the games you play, right? I love, by the way, that the plot of this week's Star Trek was about extrapolation of 3D coordinates via triangulation. That made me very happy. That was the nerdiest episode of Star Trek I've ever seen in any of the seasons. Like the new... do you watch this week's Star Trek? We're going off-piste. I'm enjoying it.
Yeah.
They solved a problem using 3D vector 3s. It was great. Loved it.
No, still my favorite scene in the new Star Trek so far has just been without spoilers. Has been the argument with the computer. That is still my most Star Trekian moment of this season. It's just
that felt like honestly that felt like something I'd write. Like that felt like that was like nerdy sci-fi. I felt that was a bit too nerdy for Star Trek actually. Like so yeah, but no, it's I'm really enjoying that show. Anyway, I feel we've gone off on one for long enough. The audience wants to.
What are you playing?
I'm still playing Assassin's Creed. And has it worked itself out though? Yes. So I on the last podcast, which will have gone up Monday last week. By Monday last week, I was enjoying Assassin's Creed, but I think if I remember right, I think I was a bit negative on Assassin's Creed in the last show.
You were experiencing the classic get open world get to it first few hours, which still seems to be a struggle. Like, so
I actually think I was just to be,
because that happened to me with Wardor. Remember?
Yeah. Well, just to be, and stop calling it that. It's not going to work. It's a salad. It's
a Waldorf.
That's if the game was a Klingon, it'd become Waldorf. I actually had the opposite problem with Assassin's Creed. I think Assassin's
and it would be served live.
Yes, it would. Best, like Revenge. You throw me off completely. I've had the opposite problem. So Assassin's Creed Origins, I think, is actually an overswing, because I think they've listened. I think they've listened to audience members going, I want to get to Assassin's Creed. I don't want to have all this crap at the start of my game. And actually, I felt lost for the start of Assassin's Creed Origins. Like, I felt overwhelmed by all the stuff. Anyway, because a lot of it isn't explained. And this is, I'm going to actually, I say this a lot, but I think I'm actually going to do it this time. I think I'm actually going to, once I finish Assassin's Creed Origins, I'm going to go back and restart and play the opening couple of hours, because there's lots of stuff that I don't think it ever taught me. And I think I just had to kind of work out after a few hours. I remember last time I was talking about like how it was really hard to read the HUD, how it was really, but more importantly, like how to, to spot where enemies were. That's because there's this really good eagle mechanic where you press a button, you've got the eagle overhead, and you can kind of use them as a drone to spot enemies and kind of fill up your UI essentially with information. And I'm not sure the game ever taught me that. They taught me that I could go into eagle mode and I could look through the eagle's eyes and I could use that to find objectives. But in terms of like tagging enemies, I don't think the game ever actually like notified me of that functionality. So I was running through the game like, I have no way of knowing where the enemies are. I'm constantly getting caught. And it was because I wasn't basically pressing the find all the enemies button. Because I don't think that was actually signposted. Maybe it was. People might be yelling at their podcast listening tool of choice right now, because maybe there is a tutorial and I just kind of missed it or wasn't paying enough attention. But there's enough stuff like that where once you work it out, similarly with the combat system, just like once they give you some time to work that stuff out, it genuinely, I think, is the best Assassin's Creed I've ever played. And I say that and it's been a while. Like Black Flag, I think, was the last time I genuinely enjoyed an Assassin's Creed. And even that had its problems. And I'm the one of the rare people who liked Black Flag all the time it wasn't on a boat. I didn't like the boat bits.
How dare you, sir?
I know that's the thing that everyone liked about Black Flag, but for me, Black Flag was because that's, to me, the boat stuff didn't feel like Assassin's Creed. It was fine, but it wasn't the bit that I enjoyed. And then Unity and Syndicate just were weak, like didn't feel great at all. And then this one, they've genuinely iterated and fixed a lot of things. The loot mechanics are really satisfying. Like, I'm a sucker for any kind of RPG system, like a light RPG system in an open world game. I love that stuff. The combat feels great. I mean, I've seen people refer to it as Witcher 3 with good combat, and that probably is where I'm landing on it. It feels like Witcher 3, but just more polished in its interaction design for me. It definitely loses some of the kind of the nuance of the story of Witcher 3 and the kind of the personality of those cutscenes, but in terms of how it feels much better than Witcher 2.
I'm fascinated by this concept now because I like Witcher 3's combat, and that's...
You're like me with Black Flag and my hatred of boats. Witcher 3 is kind of... I've seen it discussed a lot as a game that doesn't have good feeling combat. Which is definitely an opinion I agree with.
That is something I is not for this show. that is something
maybe it's one of those things where I mean I bounced off of Witcher. I think once I got to, there was like a castle where I met. There's like, I bounced off it after about 10, 15 hours. I was done with Witcher 3.
Yeah, no,
so probably I didn't see stuff that was later in the game. But anyway, yeah. So Assassin's Creed is great. It's opening up really nicely. It feels nice. It's just, it does feel, I was very, very, I didn't believe they were going to really iterate. Like, I was very kind of cynical about the idea that they were going to take a year off from the game releases and they were actually going to bother to kind of iterate. I thought that was a bit of PR spin. I thought they were going to maybe add some more cutscenes and just kind of, it was going to be very similar feeling. It feels like so much of the design is actively fixing problems with Assassin's Creed. And just knowing where the fun of Assassin's Creed is. You know, obviously you can ride horses or camels between different areas, right? Like every Assassin's Creed, you get a camel. That's your starting...
Do the camels spit?
Probably. I've not been around one long enough. But,
do they make the camel noises?
Yeah, they do. They make terrible, horrible, grotesque noises throughout.
I love camel noises.
So you're going to be into that. But what's always been true of the Assassin's Creed game is that riding an animal is boring and not very interesting, and the controls never feel that particularly cool. And outside of some cool like combat moments, like it's just not fun to go from A to B in Assassin's Creed. So what does the game do? It allows you to auto drive essentially, which would be ridiculous in a GTA game, but in an Assassin's Creed game, it's like, well, yeah, I want to get to the next bit where I get to stab someone in the face. So now it has this auto. You press and hold a button, and then the mount will just auto steer you towards your objective. And then what do they give you? Well, they've got that eagle thing. So as you're riding, I can jump into my eagle and I can be flying and soaring across the rooftops, watching little camel running along beneath me to where it's going, and I'm having fun. I'm scouting the area as an eagle, exactly, and I'm getting kind of these awesome vistas. The Assassin's Creed's always been great at the views, but you don't get to see the views very often unless you're doing the climbing. So the eagle now opens that up. It really feels iterative in the best way. It feels like they've really fixed a lot of problems. And once you get past that first couple of hours of terrible tutorial that doesn't teach you anything, somehow is both slow and useless, once it gets past that, it's great. And once it clicked for me, it really clicked. And now there's a possibility this is my game of the year.
Whoa, roll it back there, buddy. What just happened?
I'm trying to think what else is on that list. Prey, maybe? Although I still need to finish Prey because this is definitely for our Game of the Year episode, which we will be doing. But that's my point. That's the turnaround I happened in the space of about half an hour this weekend. Was, oh my god, I hate this. I can't play this anymore. To, I think this might be my favourite game I've played this year. I'm having so much fun with it. And you know what else? Sorry, can I keep going? Because I've got another game I'm playing. Call of Duty.
Okay. No.
Single player campaign of Call of Duty. Genuinely having a lot of fun with that as well.
Huh.
It's a Call of Duty, and I've definitely seen criticism of the Call of Duty single player campaign. I think it's all fair. It is much more linear than not linear. That's the wrong word.
I was about to say they've all been linear.
Repetitive, I guess, is the word. Like it's much more. Now you're in a sniper section. Now you're in a driving section. It's much more kind of modularly repetitive in that you can see the whirring of the game designer brain of like, we need this bit, then this bit, then this bit, in a way that it was smoother in previous games. But the thing I love about it is I know who the characters are in a Call of Duty game. And like, I can see their arcs, and I can see them changing and growing and having emotional relationships to each other. And I know who the baddies are, and I know why. I mean, that's an easy part of the World War II game. But like, it's genuinely telling a good story, and it's kind of old fashioned. I think that's what it is. I think, if you look at the last few Call of Duty, and to be clear to listeners, I don't play multiplayer very much at all. So I literally buy a single player. I buy Call of Duty for the single player campaign and half an hour in the zombie mode just to laugh at whichever voice actors they got this year. I hear David Tennant's in it this year, so I'll enjoy that for half an hour and then I'll move on. But I think it's because of what they're aping. I think in the old Call of Duties, in the previous Call of Duties, last few years, they've definitely been trying to make Michael Bay games. And Michael Bay can't tell a story, and I genuinely don't think he can convey character or personality. And I think with this one, they're ripping off, Spielberg and, the great war movies of the kind of the 70s and 80s, Dirty Dozen, that kind of thing. And those were great stories about compelling characters. And they're kind of old-fashioned, and I'm sure a 15-year-old watching Dirty Dozen now would be like, what the hell is this? But genuinely, the old schoolness of what it's trying for is, I think, forcing it into telling a coherent story. It's cliche as hell. You've got your squad, and you've got the guy from Transformers who's the sergeant who doesn't respect you and thinks you're kind of a douchebag, but he's kind of looking out for you. And there's a story there. He's got a heart of gold, and I'm definitely going to play a flashback of him, and what happened with him. And you've got, the cheeky con man on the team. You've literally got the nerdy dude with glasses from every Vietnam movie. You've got, these kind of archetypes and kind of very straightforward stuff.
The nerdy guy with glasses from every Vietnam movie is the stock character.
He is the stock character. But I can't remember the last time I saw him in a Second World War movie. It's weird. He's out of place. It's like, you should be in a Vietnam movie. It's weird that you're here.
Biloxi Blues? It might be Biloxi Blues is the last time I can think of the Vietnam character being in
a Second
World War movie.
Just to be a pretentious arsehole about it, most Second World War movies are actually Vietnam movies. That said, because they were all made in the 70s, so they were actually talking about that. Anyway, that's nerdy. But there's definitely, I'm not sure it's entirely intentional, but it's really coherent. What's also interesting about that coherence is they've clearly, given how long these games take, it's not a rip-off of Battlefield 1, because obviously they wouldn't have had time to rip them off. It's presented in the menu as very You remember Battlefield... Was it Battlefield 1, the one that came out last year, the First World War Battlefield?
Yes.
Yeah. So it's like Battlefield in that they show you the map and they show you your progression on a map screen, and the levels themselves are very discrete. Most of these games, you get kind of this flow through. It's something like Wolfenstein. Yes, there are unique, specific environments, but it kind of all flows smoothly. Like it's all one narrative, kind of that Half-Life clone approach. Whereas this one, you definitely have these 40-minute levels. You've got 12 40-minute levels, and you can play them through, and they feel very much like distinct playing pieces. And that's great for me, because that makes it the perfect lunchtime game. I just, crack out a level over lunch and have a good time. But yeah, I'm genuinely having a good time with it. It's definitely not excellent, but it's the first Call of Duty storyline in a while where I could literally tell you what's going on.
Well, it's funny because going back 20 years now to the original Call of Duty, that was the whole thing about those games, was that the World War II, and this is why I think there's a huge difference between doing a World War II game and doing a modern warfare style game. Like, put aside for 1 second that, Modern Warfare, and not Modern Warfare TM, but Modern Warfare, the concept, is, 50 Shades of Grey. It's like you don't know, like we don't know anymore who are the good guys, who are the bad guys, late stage capitalism, right? Like, neo-fascism, like there's all this, like
Kevin Spacey probably is the bad guy.
Well, right.
Well, that's advanced warfare. That's the thing. I think that's the other thing is they've soft rebooted it 3 or 4 times. I know Soap McTavish.
Right, but that's a character inside of a gray story. Like they're who were the bad guys there? Were they the Russians? Do you even know anymore?
I think you've perfectly summarized it by saying it's 50 Shades of Grey, because 50 Shades of Grey is a I've not read it, so it might be brilliant, might be massively unfair. But 50 Shades of Grey might not be very good, but also it's also confined by the storytelling of the thing it's ripping off of Twilight, right? That's what I'm saying, is Call of Duty for the last 10 years has been 50 Shades of Grey to Michael Bay movies. And somehow they've now become 50 Shades of Grey to Spielberg movies, and therefore the quality's jumped up. That's basically what I'm saying. Like there's a real heart to it. There's actual characters and story, and I care. I mean, it does suffer from, as a European guy, it is weird that all Second World War movies and games are set in about 9 months, right at the end of the war. Because that's the bit that Americans played a big part in, right? And there's definitely parts of the Second World War which would be interesting to see in a video game. In the same way as actually Battlefield 1 was great, because in schools, I don't know how the First World War was taught in America, but in at least in my education, World War 1 was taught as trench warfare, and it's horrible, and everyone fucking died, and it should never happen again. Right? And that was the kind of, and it should never happen again is the last sentence of every lesson about any war in British schools, right? So playing Battlefield 1 and having all that Lawrence of Arabia stuff, having all of those, the guys in the planes, all of that narrative that wasn't trench warfare was the stuff that blew me away, because I'm a history nerd, so I knew that stuff existed, but I'd never seen it portrayed, and I'd never experienced it in that kind of, in an entertainment medium before. And it feels like Second World War is crying out for stuff that isn't Pacific theatre or the end of the European theatre. Like, there's definitely a war that was happening for 5 years before that didn't have many American accents, but was interesting.
It's not a coincidence that Call of Duty starts with the storming of the beach. Saving Private Ryan starts with the storming of the beach.
And I get it. If your primary audience and all of your veterans that that your grandparents fought in that war, then you want to tell their story. I'm not making some big political statement here. I just think there's probably more stories to be mined that we've not, because I have definitely stormed the beaches of Normandy quite a few times, and this Call of Duty does a good job of letting me storm the beaches of Normandy. Someone pointed out on my Twitter though that that you're using a Russian gun, which is interesting from a historical context of why would you have a Russian gun on Normandy, but sure. So yeah, it's interesting. I think it's I'm having a good time with it. Unless they really drop the ball in the second half, I'm liking the Call of Duty single player campaign. So it's a nice diversion. And actually last year's was the one where it was all space, right? That was pretty good as well, actually, in fairness. With Kit Harington. Was that last year?
I don't remember.
I think that was pretty good. The space one, like it feels like a couple of years ago.
Was that the moon? That was the Moonraker one, right?
Yeah, but very kind of. Yeah, it was Moonraker basically. Yeah, it was pretty much. But I'm liking this direction for Call of Duty. I like that they seem to be really playing with the format, and be it the story or the gameplay. Like if that's what we're going to get, if we're going to get a lot of, we're going to get one track of these, which is is it Sledgehammer on World War II? Mm-hmm. I can't remember. But like if Sledgehammer are going to basically really refine and do good storytelling with the kind of the classic COD gameplay, and then who did the other one? Was it Raven? I can't keep track of the studios now. Or Infinity Ward.
It's Infinity Ward.
Okay, so if Infinity Ward are now going to do the more innovative stuff, like I'm okay with Call of Duty like having years where they do something that's very gameplay innovative, which I feel like last year they did a lot of innovative gameplay in there. This year the story's better. I think that's okay for COD games to have different objectives, and frankly, given the way they're produced, that's going to happen. So it's interesting. I'm having a good time. Assassin's Creed is genuinely blowing me away. Call of Duty was surprisingly fun.
I've continued with my Mario.
You're playing Mario. I need to buy that because I'm traveling tomorrow. I need to get that ordered so I can take that on the plane with me tomorrow.
You already did Rabbids, right?
Yeah, I'm right at the end of it. I think I'm in the last world. I just need to crack on and finish it. But yeah, that was that, and that was great.
You should finish Rabbids first.
You think?
Yes. That is a very enjoyable experience. But yes, doing Mario, and going to my 500 stars, 500 moons.
How big a part of that is that? Because I'm not a big collectathon guy. Am I going to have fun with the game if I'm not into collecting everything?
So it's and you can strongly disagree with me when you actually get to it, but it is so elegantly done that I don't really feel like I'm on a collectathon. I feel like I am just collecting, like doing different, because every single
doesn't feel tedious is all.
Right. It there's so much, it changes itself up so much that like this time you need to do some acrobatics to get this moon, and this one you just need to stomp on this thing to get this moon, and this one you need to chase someone to get the only ones that drive me bonkers are the races, the Koopa races, where it's horrific. Like if you are not completely on point with your acrobatics, it's just, you will fail by like 20ths of a second. And it's the worst.
I will get to it, definitely.
Yeah, but if you're just looking to play the main game, yeah, you can get through the main game, in a very, in a couple days, and then you open up the next thing shortly after that, and then I have no idea what happens as I continue to march on, getting more moons. But the Switch is a legit platform. It's great. It's great to see.
It's filling up, isn't it? There's a lot of great games coming to it.
Yeah, it's a great platform, and it's nice to see. It's nice to see that again from Nintendo, because I couldn't even be bothered with a Wii U. Apparently, like most consumers, and then the Wii was just it wasn't an HD system. And so everything was all jaggy and pixelated and looked really weird. And this wasn't a situation.
And it also was like, it was behind the iPad, right? In terms of the screen and stuff. Like, it always felt, from the start with me, the Wii U, because I got a Wii U pretty quickly, and that felt very out of date immediately.
And that was the weird part about it, because like I remember my old editor at the time got a lot of hate for
on the internet, games website,
yeah, but got a lot of hate for pointing out that the Wii wasn't an HD system, and when you stop to think about it, like this wasn't a situation where Xbox and PlayStation hadn't been HD compatible, and that most consumers had HD televisions by that point. Like this was a weirdly conscious cost-saving decision on Nintendo's part, and it worked out clearly because the Wii sold gangbusters. But yeah, I hated waggle controls. Like I couldn't. It was so frustrating.
I hated designing for waggle controls. Although there was a certain art to like making it so that it detected a waggle and then putting a graphic on screen that implied there was actually much cleverer detection going on than it was just noticing a shake, basically.
Yeah.
That was always fun as a designer. That was my start, was working on Wii games. I enjoyed it. It was a good point to come into the industry, actually, because it was such a weird technology.
Yeah. And so, here we are, and Nintendo has a nice portable console, but at the same time it has more normalized controls, and that's kind of what I've been wanting for a decade. It's
I think
nice.
It's the portability and the power that makes it. Like, the idea that you can play Doom on a handheld, like, that's just amazing. That's just like, it scratches all those itches of kind of they're appealing to all of their audiences, I guess is what I'm saying. It's not just the casual side of things, it's the hardcore as well. I think that's what's really exciting.
Yeah.
I want Sony to rip them off. I want my Vita too. I really do.
That would be
I need the Switch to do really well so that Sony basically has no choice. That's what I want. I want them to be forced to release a Vita 2.
That would be fantastic, as long as the cost is under control. Because my fear my fear with a Sony Vita 2 situation is that it's sort of like just make a $300 system, right? Just make something that is, that works and is good, and that I can, play a God of War on or something along those lines.
Yeah, you want you want exactly what Nintendo are doing. You want 2 or 3 tentpole awesome games, and then just a lot of third party. That's ultimately all you want.
But here's where it gets weird, because, and this is a much deeper well to go down another time. But I
this
think
podcast is already Titanic.
Yeah, I think the Switch is the first will be the first Nintendo console in a while where we may see a new breakout from it. That something will be made for this, because yes, every single time we go through the motions, a new Zelda, a new Mario Kart, a new Smash Brothers, and and it's iterating on really amazing franchises, but and I know everyone right now is screaming, but Splatoon, yeah, okay, but something a little bit more than that, something that is whatever the Red Dead is of this new console. I would love to see something like that, where it's just a complete and total breakout game and franchise, and I think this has real potential for that to happen. But the question is, of course, will that come from Nintendo? Which probably, yeah. Or will it come from a third party? And this is the first time in a couple generations now where a third party might be the one to do it. And now it's time for what's going on at the studio, and I'm going through the wonderful world of self-publishing on Amazon. The only thing making it worth it for me at this point is the lovely feedback we've received about the Game Dev Business Handbook.
It's a good book.
We've been at dinners now where it comes up in conversation, which is kind of
Well, the chap cool. Who cornered you, who'd read it.
Yes.
I was like, oh, cool.
And then I was actually at a party this weekend, and people brought it up to me.
Parties without me, it's quite upsetting.
You were invited.
Oh, I was actually. No, I was. Sorry. Yeah, I forgot that one. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I was invited. Sorry. Whoops.
Yeah. So, but yeah,
we're talking about it there, were they? To you?
Yep.
That's nice. That's nice.
So it's cool. But yes, we are currently going through the process of getting that up on Amazon. We have our proof copies, which look great. We're gonna do a couple little things with that, and then go into full production. And that's all the exciting book stuff going on right now. But Mike, you are off to Minsk for Devgam. I still don't. Devgam, right? That's how I'm supposed to say it.
I think so. That's how I've been saying it. Unless everyone's laughing at me behind my back. I don't know. Yeah, Devgam.
So what is Devgam?
Devgam is a Russian and Eastern European games conference. I think basically former Soviet countries basically are where it's usually held. And it's interesting. It's a smaller event. It's very kind of community driven. So it's not, you go to some events and it's, there's a lot of kind of big bravado and expense and that kind of scale. And you go to some other events and it's much more clearly a grassroots thing. And Devgam's definitely in the second category. It's a part of the world which doesn't have many game conferences and game events. And I think the people who organize it are just trying to build that community and kind of cultivate learning, which is great. And it's very cool to go over there and talk to people and just, see a part of the industry that I don't get to meet every now and again. You know, it's a nice crowd, and there's lots of interesting stuff going on. I mean, Eastern European dev in general is really interesting right now. You've had there's a lot of mod community stuff, and hobbyists have been over there for years. With some really big studios, you've also got something like Witcher, for example, which has had this kind of massive explosion of indie studios kind of coming off of it into Europe in general, but Eastern Europe as well. So there's some really interesting cultural stuff going on there in terms of just the games development scene kind of spinning up and getting started. So it's interesting to check in on it. I went to the one in Russia last year, and yeah, this year it's in Minsk. So it's interesting to kind of check in and see where that part of the industry is. And
what will you be talking about? Are you allowed to mention what that's about?
I'm doing a talk. I'm doing Subsurface. I'm ripping off, actually. I went to DICE Europe. There was a really good talk by one of the chaps in charge of Horizon Zero Dawn, and he presented a talk about Horizon, but he did it as a chronological kind of, this is how we made Horizon Zero Dawn, and obviously he was describing hundreds of people over 7 years. But with mine, I'm trying to do that with Subsurface. So I'm going to go into Subsurface Circular, talk about the process by which that game actually got made. So going from, me landing after GDC, after finishing all of our pitches on the other project, and, us starting to talk about maybe we need to come up with like a project to do in the gap, and follows it right through to launch day. So it's hopefully interesting. Like, I think it's an interesting case study. It's an interesting game to pick apart and go, well, how do you actually make something like Subsurface Circular in 6 months, and how does that all plug in? Who starts when? How do things depend on each other? So should be interesting.
1, 2, 3. I wanna thank you for reading the freedom mail again. Thank you for reading the freedom mail again.
Hola, Mike and Alexander. A couple of questions. One, and the funny thing is about this question, I'm not entirely sure I understand it, so I'm actually looking forward to you kind of translating.
Is it a technical thing then?
It's not a technical thing. It's the way it's worded, and okay. I'm not sure. Number one, what does your development environment look like? I know you use Unity, but what OS do you typically use, and why? Is it just preference or have you found other benefits for yourselves and or development within your chosen environments?
So in terms of process, we're using a Mac. I'm using a Mac. Different team members use different things. I think most people are on Macs actually that I work with. Only reason for Mac is I prefer the operating system, and the thing for me is always how quickly can I get to work. How quickly can I just bought a bigger screen because I was getting annoyed by Windows taking up too much space on my laptop. I'm all about kind of getting to the problem as quickly as possible. So Mac I just prefer it as an OS. We use Bitbucket for our source control. What else plugs in? Slack is our general kind of conversational app, and kind of where we jump around the table and solve problems. But yeah, basically that's pretty standard kind of setup really. I don't think and honestly, I could see you doing it a million other ways. Like lots of developers use Windows, that's fair enough. I think a few use Linux. I don't know quite what the developer support is on Linux for making stuff in Unity and Unreal and kind of those kind of 3D engines, but yeah, I think I'm pretty standard, really. Nothing particularly clever.
But is it me or development environment? I'm not. Is that an older word? Is that a newer word?
I've heard people refer to that like as what's your rig, right? What's your setup? So yeah, I'm using a MacBook Pro plugged into a 4K monitor and running OS X, whatever the newest one is. Magic Zebra Brush or whatever they've called the latest Mac update. I can't remember. Mountain Range Rainbow
Cupcake. No, wait, that's
Android. I think
that's Android. Yeah. Number two, how far out do you think about a game before starting implementation? Looking forward to picking up the Game Dev Business Handbook soon. Jeremy.
So for me, I think we do a lot of thinking. I think we probably do more pre-production than a lot of people do, just in terms of trying to work out as many of the problems as we can before we start, because developing a game is quite expensive. So the more you can kind of work out beforehand, and thinking about it, the better. There is the kind of the more prototype firsty approach, and there's a couple of things we're doing that are more in that road, where we're just kind of feeling out an idea and seeing where it goes. But historically, it's definitely been a more traditional kind of pre-production, working out what we want to do and then doing it. Whereas, yeah, prototyping can work. Subsurface kind of grew out of a prototype. We definitely, although no, actually, no, that's not true. Subsurface, I did do more paper design on before we started than you'd normally expect. The thing we're doing right now is definitely prototype led. That is, you know, me and Nick kind of playing around in engine and seeing where it takes us. But that's generally not how we do things. Generally, things are a bit more planned out for us, just because of the money involved and the time involved for everyone of actually making a game.
Yeah, it's definitely more planned. It's an interesting one because it's definitely more planned out, but I wouldn't say that there is consistency in where the concepts come from. So, like, if I think about something like Earthshape, you had been talking to me about, you know, the sort of dot system.
I made that as like a little mobile prototype. I think over a weekend, I was just like, I think this is a really interesting mechanic and I want to make it. So, and I had that on my phone for like, I feel like I'd been showing that to people at things for like 6 months before we showed it to Google. I think that's just a thing I'd made. And then we realized it kind of fit what they were looking for. I think it was one of those situations, right, where they asked us, like, do you have any ideas for mobile games that might work in VR? And I literally pulled out my phone and said, well, this is quite interesting, you know.
Yeah, and then Subsurface was, and this is in the most polite way possible, I think Subsurface was kind of you spiting me because you were trying to explain the concept.
Spiting you?
And no, it was you were trying, like, you clearly had this vision and I wasn't understanding it, and you're like, just let me mess around with this.
Certainly, yeah. So I don't think that wasn't my reason for making it. The reason for making it was definitely that I wanted to do non-linear narrative. Like, that was definitely, and Subsurface kind of half achieves that, and I think we're going to continue and play with different ideas in the future and see if we can improve on that. But like, yeah, I do remember like having the initial kind of documentation and the planning, and I think even possibly the very first kind of bits of code from Moo and showing it to you, and you being like, this, I don't like this, it doesn't make sense, this won't, it's just all on one train, you know, that kind of thing, which honestly is a very fair response. And I think the deal we made was, I'll not spend much money and you won't stop me from making it. I think that was essentially the arrangement we came to. But yeah, but it could easily have gone the other way, right? That could have been a terrible game and you would have been right and we'd have wasted all the development funds. So, you know, I'm sure that will happen in the future. But you're right. It could go different ways.
But I think there was also there was the challenge there of like, you knew I was going to have to somehow be cool with it. So like I think
Subsurface, I'd frame it in a less combative way, that we went into Subsurface knowing we had 6 months to kill, because we just had 6 months that we had to use.
I love how you said non-combative way and then literally used the word kill.
But it's combative against the concept of time rather than you. That's the change I've made to your position. So I think we knew we had that time, and it was already paid for, essentially. Like, it had to happen, so we might as well be experimental. I think the scenario like we're in now, for example, where we don't have like a set period of time we have to fill up, means we're probably making less, I'd say equally creative, but less risky choices. We're more careful when we you know, it's like I'm trying to think of an analogy, but like, if you're on holiday, if you're already on holiday and you know you fly back the day after tomorrow, you're going to fill your time and you'll have fun. But if you're planning a holiday and you're trying to decide if you need those extra 2 days, you're probably less likely to do it because you're like, well, it costs money and I kind of need to get back and get on with work and stuff and all this stuff. So I think there was a really weird bubble that Subsurface was able to kind of come to life in, because it was all just an agreed null space. And the fact that basically what I'm saying is, I think if we hadn't had that weird bubble and you'd said to me, Mike, I don't get it, this isn't going to work, I'd have like listened to you more than what I did, where I was like, well, I know it's going to work. So I genuinely think the conversation was, what's the biggest amount of money you'll give me without forcing me to stop. Or
That's
like that.
right.
I think we literally worked out the number. This is what I remember. We worked out the number where it was like, I know this is going to, or I'm pretty sure this is going to work. You never know, but I sort of did know it was going to work. What's the smallest amount of money you're comfortable like throwing away on this in the world where I'm not right? And on this occasion, it turned out I was right. On future occasions, I'm sure it'll go the other way.
Mike and Alex, I am currently studying game design at the University of Utah as part of their computer science program. Previously, I was studying under the film department since the game design program here can also be pursued that way. The reason for my switch was that I realized I'm more interested in learning about the computational systems that make games possible than I am in the ways in which they relate to the film world. Additionally, I figure a CS degree will be more helpful in getting a job once I graduate, which will help ease the financial strain I expect in my desired career as an independent developer. You have no idea. However, I just learned
to laugh mid-email at someone.
I'm not laughing at him.
Sorry, author of email. That's,
No. I'm not.
Carry on.
However, I just learned that the university will be introducing a third game design degree next semester, one which will focus specifically on games, rather than relying on computer science or film. This sounds extremely interesting to me, but I have also now developed an interest in computer science. Obviously, I can't really ask you which degree I should find more interesting, but I can ask which you think will be more helpful. Will a computer science degree be more likely to get me a job than a Bachelor of Science in Games? Will a Bachelor of Science in Games be more likely to get me a job in the games industry than a computer science degree with an emphasis in games? What kind of job in the industry might each get, etc., etc.? I understand the answers in these questions are often moving targets. Yup. But as two people whose opinions and work I respect, I would really appreciate your input. Thanks again for the podcast and great video games. Keep it up. Sincerely, Trevor. Where do you want to start on this one?
I think it's a very good question with, in my opinion, a pretty straightforward answer, to be honest. So I'm speaking here as a Bachelor of the Arts in Video Games Design. So I'm less qualified than the emailer. So for me, it's a simple logic gate problem. It's like, there we go. Let's do it technically, right? So the two options on the table, and we're assuming here that he has to take a degree. He has to do a degree.
Yes.
By the definition of this, he's doing a degree. And his options are a vanilla computer science degree and a focused Bachelor of the Sciences in computer game programming, right? If you take the two jobs that he's the option space on we're literally getting John Nash the game theory out of this, right? The two options for jobs he has are three options for jobs he has are computer games programmer, junior level, because you're never going to go in above a junior level unless you're very fucking lucky, or general computer science person, working in the financial sector, working that you can, apps, there's a million jobs obviously in with a computer science kind of generalized bent, or no job, right? Or indie, I guess is the fourth one.
Well, he does mention that. He says, I figure a computer science degree will be more helpful in getting a job once I graduate, which will help ease the financial strain I expect in my desired career as an independent developer.
Okay, so the short version is you should probably get the computer science degree. The long version is a games design degree, or games programming degree, a Bachelor of Science in Games Programming. You'll be able to get a junior job in industry, working at a studio, in theory, if you're good and your portfolio's good and you're clearly passionate about games. Or you'll be able to get... That's it. Because chances are a more kind of traditional programming job will lift its nose up a little bit at a games degree. Now, that doesn't mean you're not qualified. You might have a portfolio that actually demonstrates work that would get you the job anyway, but it's not no one's gonna open your CV in the financial sector and go, oh my god, it's one of those game developers. They're geniuses. Unfortunately, that's not the perception they're gonna have. However, the same CV, the same degree of passion, you walk into a financial job, they're going to see the degree, it's going to tick their box, they'll give you the junior job. If you walk into the games job, I know a lot of programming leads in the games industry who specifically prefer a computer science degree. They specifically, because they like the generalist approach. There are some that maybe want the other. But your portfolio will have games in it. If you want to be an indie developer, I hope you're already starting to play with making your own games. So by the time you graduate from this degree, you'll have some weird little esoteric indie games you programmed in your spare time, as I did, and you'll walk into a job in the games industry because you'll have that CS degree that shows what you can do in a general sense, and you'll have portfolio work that shows what you can do specifically. On the issue of if your objective is to be an indie, you've got two paths to that. One is the path I took, which is you go and work in a games company for 5 years, 6 years, and learn the trade and then leave. Or if you want to go straight into indie, you're going to need to financially support yourself. And that's where the CS degree is much more useful to you, because you're going to be in a much better paid job with a CS degree in, say, the financial sector than you would be as an entry-level coder in the games industry. Generally, the games industry, coders can be paid anywhere around half the price of their skill sets outside of games. A big part of how the games industry functions is that it relies on the staff to love making the product, right? You're being paid less because it's vocational. You want to be there. You love video games, so you're willing to take a lower salary. Games people are not paid what their skills are worth external to the games industry. And a lot of programmers leave after a few years because they realize that and they've got enough experience that they can. To put this in perspective, I know a guy who works in financial programming. He writes the dullest software in the world for financial institutions. By the way, I'm sure lots of people love making that stuff, but I don't think he does. He makes it. It's good. He makes this software. He works 6 months a year because he makes so much money from making financial software that for the other 6 months, he can essentially, as a hobby, have my job. He goes to all the games conferences. He goes to E3. He has a great time traveling the world, basically pretending to be a game developer. As far as I know, has never actually shipped anything, but he doesn't care because he's enjoying the culture of it. He enjoys messing around in engines. He has that enjoyment, and this is how he's described himself. Like, he's having a good time. Basically, my job is his hobby. That should give some perspective to, if you can get a CS degree and get kind of a comfy financial job, then there's nothing stopping you from using a lot of spare time to pursue the indie thing. Or you go into a games company. For me, CS doesn't close any options to you. I think a game development degree does close off options to you. How do you feel?
So yes, I basically, typically I'm the one that has to be the more conservative one on this. No, it's
when it comes to people's paying their rent, I'm incredibly. I'm not gonna. Yes. Sorry. Allow me to pretend to be Mike Bithell for a bit. Of course, man, you're gonna learn loads on a computer game specific course that's going to be really awesome, and it's going to improve your creative process and the way you approach games. But in your case, it sounds like you already enjoy CS. You're not being forced into doing CS because you feel you should. You are genuinely at a crossroads where you're mentioning you enjoy it. For me, it feels like a bit of a no-brainer to me. Yeah.
So, pretty much everything that Mike said, I almost totally agree with.
Excellent. If only you could have been that supportive at the launch of Subsurface Circular.
It wasn't the launch.
The launch of development, the start
there
of development.
There we go.
I agree with pretty much everything Mike's saying. I need to get you a t-shirt.
I pretty much agree with that. So for a little bit more context, Trevor, because you go to the University of Utah, you are. I am speculating here that you are an American, and therefore, as an American, I believe making sure you take care of yourself from a health perspective is a priority situation. So getting a job.
You mean financially?
Financially.
You don't think that Americans need to look after themselves more than other people, do you? You just think that it's more tied to your personal finances?
Oh, that's a much deeper conversation. That is a way deep.
We'll dash past that then.
Yeah, as someone who has lost, almost going on 20 pounds since I've been living here, and eating normally.
I would put on about 10 stone if I moved to America.
10 stone is 14 pounds? No, it's
No.
14 kilos.
It's like no, I was being sarcastic. It's about 140 pounds.
Yeah.
I wouldn't do that. I wouldn't go that big.
I mean,
yes.
maybe about 50 pounds, 60 pounds. Like, yeah.
I'm definitely benefiting from,
It's a, I mean, and this is, and that's why it starts to get really complicated. Anyway, yes, a computer science degree, certainly the way to go, again, from a corporate perspective. I shouldn't have used the word conservative. I should have used the word corporate. From a corporate perspective, it opens up more doors. If you decide to go into financial technology, which is, the sector that is growing so rapidly right now. But if you decide to go into that, it's exactly what Mike said. You will be paid double, potentially even triple what you would in a game studio. And with that money, you can do your own thing. And very much like he's saying, you should, if you truly want to be an independent developer, you should be making games now. We're not talking we're not talking Stardew Valley here, but experimenting with, making games, going through the process. Maybe you've got something that's cool enough that, you decide to go through the Steam process. Learning that too is incredibly helpful. And having a job right now where, and I don't want to use the word hide, but where you can survive while what's going on right now in the game space works itself out. That's a very healthy place for you to be. So yes, computer science degree, certainly the more corporate friendly way to go. Looks good on a CV. If you decide to get into the games industry, no one's going to blink at it. And then again, of course, the games industry has that sort of I still don't know what the word is to describe it, but that I don't care what degrees you have, man. We're just looking at what your stuff is and, the things that you've
That's
made. That's
true of getting a job in the games industry. An entry-level job, I don't care what your qualification is. I care about what your portfolio is and how ridiculous your Twitter account is. Essentially, those are my two major concerns.
And that's a pretty consistent, what Mike is describing there is a pretty consistent theme. So yes, if you decide to go for the full-blown computer science degree and you get, the corporate fintech job and you decide to make some games on the side and it's a couple years from now and you decide to apply to a video game company and you show up and you've got these prototypes and they can, and it's, I've actually seen this with a couple younger devs, they'll show up to a job interview and they'll have Steam code ready for their game on Steam. So they just hand it over to, whoever's interviewing them to be like, hey, check out my game after you're done. That's the level you're playing at now when you're dealing with the games industry. So yeah, it's going the corp. There's no shame in going the sort of corporate route, and then transitioning into independent development. And as I don't know how long you've listened to the show, but that myth of that myth of overnight indie sensation from school to yes, Rami, we love Rami. He's kind of the example, but if I pull anyone else off the shelf, they have a half decade, a decade, 2 decades. PUBG guy was how many years?
He'd been modding. He came to games later. He was a DJ for years, and then he did the mod, which is escaping me. Battle Royale for is it for Armor?
Yeah.
Which one's he win? Yeah. And then so yeah, he was a few games in.
But in all of these sort of,
but then you have someone like Jonathan Blow who was at it for 20 years before it's crazy.
I would strongly encourage, when you see a story, whenever you see the overnight sensation story, I would strongly encourage actually looking at it's all on LinkedIn now anyway. Look at their CV. Look at where they've been, what they've done, because it makes an amazing story, because it's such a feel-good story. But so often it's not true. And that's what leads folks like yourself to potentially make errors in judgment, because the hype, like, you know, the hype is not real. The hype is a construct. It's a construct of late stage capitalism. Oh no, I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to do that.
You hang out with me for a couple of years, you completely changed.
It's great. The worst. It's the worst.
I can't call you neoliberal anymore because I got.
Yeah, you did.
In the comments.
Yeah, because once you start going down that road, it's like, no, I am definitely not that. And it's weird too, because neoliberalism it's actually, there's different regional concepts to it as well.
I think I'm using the old school British. Anyway, we're not going to have that conversation.
No, we're not.
Overrun.
Yeah.
But
if you have a burning question about games, game development, or just about the complexities of the universe, you can send those questions to us via contact@BithelGames.com. That's contact@BithelGames.com, through the YouTube comments of this show, or on Twitter by pinging @MikeBithell and @Slawinski. Thanks for listening to this episode of the Bithell Games Podcast. We can always use your support, so please provide reviews and 5 stars on iTunes, likes and subscribes on YouTube, and positive reinforcement on whatever other platforms you're hearing this show on whenever possible. And, you know, saying nice things about our games and our books, especially during this award season, is really nice too. Thank you for everyone who's doing that right now. This podcast was produced by Jonathan Downen. We'll be back next week. Yes, we will. We'll be back next week. I'm Alexander Slawinski. Thanks again, and get in the last word, Mike.
Butterfly.